Hello, adventurers, and welcome back to the Dragon's Lair. Today we're going to be talking about the last character for this series, the only NPC, Lamar. So, let's jump right into it, shall we? Starting off with strength. um, his build doesn't lend himself to be, like, the strongest there is, but he does have a relative amount of strength because he was doing things like boosting cars and that sort of thing. So things like breaking windows and just general fighting apply. But when you're boosting cars, don't break the windows. Yeah. Car alarms will go off, so don't do that. Not that you should ever be boosting cars.
A little illegal.
Only kind of, yeah. So there's that. As for the general score for strength, I'm gonna go somewhere around 12, maybe 14. Just because he's got some. He doesn't ever really use it as far as we see, but he's there. Right? When you look at him, he's kind of muscular.
Mm-hmm.
So, 12 to 14. Into dexterity. This is kind of where his build will lend itself a little more. So he's taller, leaner, still has some muscle, as I said, but not like Mr. Bulkman.
Mm-hmm.
So, we see him sneak around a little bit. If you go the stealth route in GTA, which, let's be honest, none of us did, it was full sin 100% of the time. But if you were to go the stealth route, Lamar would be able to keep up. And as for pickpocketing and stuff, that's what he was doing in the beginning, so he was obviously good enough at that to be able to do it and not get caught.
Mm-hmm.
So for dexterity, I would say it leans a little higher, probably somewhere towards 16 to 18, maybe 20 even by the end of it. Into Constitution. This is relative, as I've said before. I didn't really have anything to go off of here. So, comparatively to the other characters, I would say Lamar would be the one that's kind of in the background rather towards the foreground. That being said, I wouldn't say that he's necessarily unconstitutional. Lacking in constitution, yeah. Sounds weird. Lacking in constitution is the way that I think it should be said. So because of that, I would go with the score somewhere around 8 to 10. Not plus, but not really too far in the minuses either. As for intelligence, at cursory glance, I kind of thought that Lamar would be lacking in intelligence, but then I got to thinking about it for a second. Lamar was smart enough to realize that he had something going that was working for him and to not just leave it to take a chance on something else, right? And that sort of thing. He was also smart enough to realize after the introduction of Stretch, I should say spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1, we should be good. After the introduction of Stretch, that Stretch might double cross them, and to be prepared and pack heat in case he did. So just kind of stuff like that. Like, he was also smart enough in the end to realize that Franklin had a good gig going now, and that Lamar could join it or be a part of it. And Lamar was smart enough to stop what he was doing and join the better option. So for intelligence, honestly, I would say somewhere higher, somewhere around 18. Maybe a little lower, 16. Honestly, 16 to 20 for that range. If I'm gonna give a range there. Into wisdom. For every intelligent thing he did, there's also an unwise way to take it, right? So he was wise enough to not just leave the thing that was working for him to go and take a risk. That being said, he wasn't wise enough to realize that the risk was going to be something that would pay off in the long run, right? He was wise enough to realize that Stretch might double cross them. That being said, he wasn't wise enough to not take the bait and avoid it entirely. Just something like that. So honestly, it kind of depends on your take of Lamar. You could say anywhere between 6 to 14 would be the score I would give for wisdom there. Just because of there's a wise way and there's also an unwise way to take it. Into charisma. It's interesting because Lamar tries to break tension and stuff with his wit. That being said, he's not like the wittiest person of the group. So it doesn't necessarily work. For instance, he tried to joke a couple of times with Stretch to relieve the tension between Stretch and Franklin, and it didn't really help him. Honestly, though, there is something charismatic that I can give him. Is when he convinced Franklin to let Lamar join Franklin's new gig. So spoiler alert: 3, 2, 1. We should be good. Franklin and Stretch didn't leave off on like the greatest of terms, and because of that, Franklin and Lamar didn't leave off on the greatest of terms because Franklin didn't want anything to do with Stretch, and Lamar was the one that made Franklin do stuff with Stretch. So they didn't leave off on the greatest of terms, but then Lamar was able to still convince Franklin to let him join the crew, and honestly, because of that, they were both better off. So for the charisma score, I would probably say something a little higher. Probably somewhere around 14 to 16, in all honesty. We good for the scores?
Yeah.
Cool. Moving into the straightforward build. You're going to go human, specifically human variant for the sharpshooter feat. This allows you to ignore partial cover. It allows you to ignore the secondary, or the minimum range on your ranged weapons, in this case firearms. It also allows you to take a -5 to hit, plus 10 to damage option when you make a ranged attack. So things like that. As for the class, you're going to go Rogue Thief all the way. This gives you better mobility, just general better thievery things, and later on you actually get 2 turns in combat, which is actually really nice. As for, did I miss anything there? I don't think so.
No, that's all there.
Cool. As for the conceptual build, I would go Wood Elf, maybe Dark Elf, but I would probably actually lean more towards Wood Elf instead. I was hinting at this with the dexterity thing. His build is a little taller and leaner, so it kind of works with that. As for the class, I actually went Wizard, which is kind of odd, but it makes sense for a conceptual sort of thing, especially when you go down the enchantment pathway, which kind of deals with the, I don't want to say charisma, because it's not really charisma-based, but it's kind of charisma-based. Mm-hmm. With, the getting inside someone's mind, making them think a certain way, or, convincing them to do stuff, that sort of thing. So it's actually really good, because you can... You get buffs to the enchantment spells. You can target multiple creatures with one spell at higher levels, and at some point you can actually make people forget that you had enchanted them at all, which is pretty interesting and actually would be cool to do. So, and it works with Lamar because, as I said, he relies on his wit. Well, now if that fails, he's got this backup plan to make his wit work anyway. But that is all I have for you fine adventurers today. As I said, this is the last video of this series, so I believe I owe you a hint. The D&D monster that this next series will deal with begins with a T, and it has a little something to do with rangers. The next series we're doing will be based off of an animated TV show, just letting you know that. But if you can't possibly wait until then, feel free to check out my Discord or come hang out on Twitch. Other than that, I will catch you all later.